on my mark. Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at will.
Hey, good Friday morning for most of you. Good Friday afternoon. It's not, sounds weird saying good Friday like that, doesn't it? Um, it's I hope you're having a good, Friday. That's what I'm trying to say. But bear with me here. I gotta plug something in quick. But yeah, I hope that you guys are having a good Friday. I took a couple of days off. Yesterday was the 1 year anniversary of Mrs. TC's heart attack, and so I took her out of town. We she tried to escape me last year on the 13th of November. So yesterday we decided to escape together, and we went out of town and drove about an hour and 45 minutes to La Crosse, Wisconsin. Just to get away, just to get away. She had saved up some of her hard-earned gratuities, and she had a project for herself that she wanted to do, and I set it up behind the scenes, snuck that in so that she would be able to enjoy her day, and her boss was kind enough to give her the day off with pay yesterday. Somehow, I don't know, she probably had to burn some PTO or something, but she got the day off with pay yesterday. And so we hopped in the car and we made the drive over to La Crosse, Wisconsin to enjoy spending time together. And our daughter and her youngest child tagged along. So it was a good day for Mrs. TC. And so as part of that, I want to give a shout out real quick as we're waiting for some people to tune in here. I want to give a shout out to a couple of businesses in the La Crosse area. We had plans to go to one particular pizzeria, but it did not open in time for us to be able to have lunch, the mid-afternoon lunch that we were planning. So we ended up popping around in downtown La Crosse looking for a place to get some pizza, which was a bad move on my part. My weight has been under 170 pounds for the last 2 weeks. And so I decided I was going to have some pizza for the first time in a very long time, and it carb heavy, and it was not a good idea for me. But not because the pizza was bad, and that's where I'm going. We discovered this little pizza by the slice place in downtown La Crosse. So if you're anywhere near La Crosse, Minnesota, ever, and you get a chance during lunch or whatever, stop into downtown La Crosse and find Polito's Pizza. It was shockingly very good for what we paid. It was $3 a slice. And I walked in and I'm like, I felt sketchy at first. And I told the general manager this. I said, I didn't know what to make of the place at first, but man, you guys make good pizza. And it was a really nice introduction back into carb heavy pizza, because normally I have low carb or no carb crust. We do a fathead crust here at home when we make homemade pizza. And it's my way of getting my pizza fix and keeping the carbs down. So Polito's Pizza in La Crosse, Wisconsin is phenomenal. And I also want to give a shout out to where we went later in the evening or late afternoon. Mrs. TC decided that she wanted to get a piercing done. And we've discovered a place called Black Lotus. It had very good ratings. Everybody that I checked with really loved them. And we met a great guy named Scooter, not spelled the way you would expect, but we went to Black Lotus and they treated her like a queen. They absolutely treated her like a queen, because she is. And so if you're ever in the area, you go to Onalaska to find Black Lotus if you're looking to get any kind of ink or any kind of piercing work done. Check with Scooter, and after that, If you're looking for a place to get some pizza, stop down at Polito's and check them out and tell them TC from MBRR Media sent you. I told them both I was going to give them a shout out. So what are we going to talk about today? So this is not a normal government accountability type content that I do, but it is political commentary coming from a very paleo-libertarian perspective. So I want to get that out of the way right up front. Let's talk about that. Why are we talking about Victor Davis Hanson and anti-Semitism? Well, we're talking about Victor David Hanson and anti-Semitism because right now it's all the talk in political circles, it's in social circles, in all of the circles where people have these conversations. You cannot get away from the topic of anti-Semitism. You can't get away from the topic of geopolitical Zionist Israel. And everybody's got an opinion on this. And understandably so. I got people talking about it at work. Not Victor Davis Hanson, but what is anti-Semitism? What is Israel? What is the role of Christians as it relates to Israel? What is the role of Republicans as it relates to Israel and anti-Semitism and the Jewish people? And a friend of mine, he goes by K2, a dear friend, brother, Christian brother, sent me a video the other day. The video's only been out for a few days, of this Victor Davis Hanson, who I'm unfamiliar with. But he said, hey, I'm kind of wondering how you feel about this. And so I hate that. Bear with me, folks. There we go. I said, let me watch it. So I watched and rewatched and watched some more, because those of you who know me know how I am. I wasn't going to just take it on face value the first time through. I decided that I was going to do due diligence and break down what exactly was being said. But my initial response out of the gate was, this guy is not the genius that he thinks he is. So he did this video for the Daily Signal. And so he's got his own channel, plus he does stuff on the Daily Signal. So we're going to play it. The first thing that we're going to do, though, is we're going to put up this fair use warning. And so for those of you that don't know, fair use basically says, hey, this channel may make use of copyrighted material, the use of which has not always been specifically authorized by the copyright owner. This constitutes a fair use of any such copyrighted material as provided for in the Section 107 of the U.S. copyright law. And it goes on to further. Basically, I'm reading this because we're not going to play the totality of his comments, but we are going to play a good portion of them. And I'm going to break this down for you and show you why it's incredibly important for people to understand. One, we have to have definitions. We cannot operate without definitions. Two, along with having definitions, we have to make right applications when we use terms, even when we have the definitions. And those definitions need to be accurate. And Victor Davis Hanson, for apparently being an incredibly intelligent man, doesn't do any of that. I'm right out of the gate. So we're going to start. The title of this video, as you're going to see, is how is he wording? Victor Davis Hanson confronting conservative anti-Semitism. So we're going to start here, folks. And if it pops up commercials, you'll just have to bear with me on this one.
Hello, this is Victor Davis Hanson for the Daily Signal. There's been a lot of controversy recently about anti-Semitism and the threat that it poses to the United States at large. And it's been very controversial because this time it's not the well-acknowledged and well-known left-wing anti-Semitism.
We're going to stop there. Well-known and well-acknowledged left-wing anti-Semitism. It's an assertion. It's a fallacy of assertion is what he did. Well-known and understood left-wing anti-Semitism. So there is no such thing as right-wing or left-wing anti-Semitism. There's either anti-Semitism or without a modifier. Okay? There isn't a left-wing anti-Semitism or a right-wing anti-Semitism. It's just anti-Semitism. But notice what he does here. He doesn't give us a definition of what anti-Semitism is. He gives us an assertion of left-wing anti-Semitism that's well-known and well-documented. But how does he document it? And what's he used to describe anti-Semitism here?
What we see on campuses where people are yelling "river to
Oh, great. We're going
the sea," or they're chasing Jews into a library, or they're tearing down pictures of the Israeli hostages. What we've seen for the last 2 years, it's on the right.
So he's asserting left-wing anti-Semitism. And one of those things that he says is anti-Semitic is tearing down pictures of Israeli hostages. And this all goes back to October 7th of 2023. Keep that in mind. This is Victor Davis Hanson's assertion about left-wing anti-Semitism is how he's defining anti-Semitism, which is, okay, they chased Jews into a library. That happened. There's a situation on one campus where that did happen. But the other one is not anti-Semitic. Tearing down pictures of hostages taken from Israel, from the music festival, on October 7th, and then taken back into Palestine and being held by Hamas, taking down their pictures is not anti-Semitic. Notice what's missing here. There are places where pictures of Palestinians who have been killed by Israelis, by the Israeli Defense Force, and there have been pictures of hostages, people who have committed no crimes, that have been seized by IDF forces, Israeli Defense Force members, who have been seized with no evidence that they've committed any crime or been a threat to Israel, have been held for almost 2 years. We have evidence of this. We have evidence of a grape of a Palestinian man by male IDF members. They graped him to inflict punishment on him for what Hamas did. Now, also keep in mind, we're already seeing that Victor Davis Hanson's definition of anti-Semitism is strictly hatred of Jewish people. And the reality is that the Jewish people are not the only Semites. The Palestinian region, Jews and Muslims, they're all, for the most part, Semites. They're all Semitic people. They all fall into that Semitic class. And by class, I'm not referring to like class, economic class. And they're all in the Semitic class or family, if you will. So the Arabs are Semites. The Palestinians are Semites. Many of the people in that area are Semites. A lot of the people in Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Palestine, they are Semites. But we're getting a working definition from Victor Davis Hanson, and we're getting a working definition from others like him, that the only Semites are Jewish people. genetically Jewish, not the religion of Judaism, but genetically Jewish people are the only Semites. And so that's where we're at right now. So this is their definition. So we'll listen to them more.
And it came to the fore this week when Tucker Carlson on his platform gave an interview, or had an interview with the known anti-Semite and at one time pro-Nazi, Nick Fuentes. Very young man, never written much. He's not an activist with anywhere the audience of Charlie Kirk.
So this is very key. So this is really about Tucker platforming, if you will, Nick Fuentes. Look, there are lots of things that Nick Fuentes says that I'm absolutely opposed to, and Tucker has said that as well. Tucker, in his interview with Nick, actually called Nick out on some stuff. Victor Davis Hanson is not talking about, he not once does he ever mention that. He literally goes out of his way to not mention that. And this video, once again, is only, let's give it at the most 5 days. Let's say it's a 5-day-old video. The interview that Tucker did with Nick Fuentes was weeks ago. 2, 3, 4 weeks ago now. Victor Davis Hanson had more than enough time to address that interview and actually watch it and hear that Tucker, yes, he was not like aggressive towards Nick Fuentes, but he was definitely calling him out on a few things. In fact, he even pointed to Nick Fuentes' views on some stuff and said, look, as a Christian, you're not allowed to do identity politics. You're not allowed to hold hatred for someone based on their ethnicity, because as a Christian, we are to love all people of all ethnicities. That's the biblical mandate, is what Tucker tells him, and I'm paraphrasing. But Victor Davis Hanson doesn't bring any of this up. I also want to point out that he's saying that Nick Fuentes he's no kind of activist and nowhere near what Charlie Kirk was. So this is all about the Charlie Kirk situation. And so this is a challenge from this gentleman to anybody who's asking questions about what happened to Charlie Kirk, which we should all be doing. Like, folks, if you have bought the narrative that Tyler Robinson is the lone shooter, then you're hopeless. I don't know how many other things need to happen for people to wake up and realize that when the official narrative is we're being browbeat with the official narrative from the FBI and from Utah authorities and anybody else involved, that this is the only narrative and you just need to accept it. We should all be saying, nope, I don't trust any of you anymore. That should be what people are saying. But nobody's saying that. We're not being allowed to say that. And that's what Victor Davis Hanson is really doing here. He's like, look, Charlie was so much more important than Nick Fuentes. Why are you bringing Charlie Kirk into this? What? Like, I'm sorry that Charlie is dead. If you watch any of my content over the last 2 months, I've done a massive amount of man on the street interviews with people where we've brought up political violence. We brought up the assassination of Charlie Kirk. I'm sorry he's dead. He didn't deserve what he had. I have a video, short that just dropped right before I started this, where talking to a young lady who has much admiration for free and open dialogue, who said Charlie Kirk didn't deserve what he got, and basically said the reason that he was so hated by so many people is because the media told them to hate him. And she's right. But this argument that we're having has nothing to do with Charlie Kirk and Victor Davis Hanson shifting from, well, why would you platform Nick Fuentes when Charlie Kirk was so much more important? Well, that's an appeal. That's an appeal to really authority, or an appeal to a popularity. That's a logical fallacy. Nick Fuentes doesn't deserve these things. One, because he's not an important activist, and two, he's not Charlie Kirk. So he's discrediting Nick Fuentes by saying he's not Charlie Kirk, and also discrediting Tucker, but he's not done yet. He's not done.
but he's well known. He's glib, and Tucker had him on.
Oh, he is more than well known, folks. Like this people, you need to be paying attention. I'm not saying watching his stuff, but you need to be talking to people who seem to be getting their information from Nick Fuentes and challenging them in your personal conversations. What Tucker did was not wrong. Tucker had every right to do what he did, and I'm glad he did it. But Nick Fuentes did not need to be platformed by Tucker Carlson. Nick Fuentes platforms himself. He is that popular, folks. He is just absolutely that popular. And we need to be asking ourselves why.
Now, that caused an enormous controversy because of the things that Fuentes has said in the past. He's
Terrible
supported going after Jews, suggesting that they are behind many of the nefarious cabals or conspiracy that take place, that they're not really white people. He's attacked J.D. Vance, his wife, Vice President Vance's wife, first.
Look, that he shouldn't be attacking people. Character assassination is terrible. I hate character assassination. I have no room for it in my life. I don't have room for it in other people's lives. But we all do it. We all do character assassination from time to time. We all say terrible, hurtful things about people when we're angry. That's human nature, and we should apologize for that and move on when we do it, and do our best to not do it again. But I'm gonna let's just be honest. The conservative movement in the United States, whatever constitutes conservatism in the United States, is notorious for making fun of people who don't pick traditional American names, folks. It's just the reality. They just absolutely love to make fun of people who don't pick traditional American names. And by American names, they mean things like John and Charlie and David. I mean, how many times have you heard conservative influencers or whatnot pick on somebody of African American heritage or black culture who picks a completely just random, just apparently to the listener, to the observer, just a name that just seems just un-American, and say things like, well, why would that person name their kid that? Like, why would they burden them with that? It happens all the time. So for Victor Davis Hanson to get bent out of shape that Nick Fuentes mocks J.D. Vance and his wife for giving their children traditional Indian names, but to ignore the fact that conservatives are constantly mocking people from other, cultures for not picking traditional American names is just beyond the pale. It shows how disconnected this old fogey is.
Names, I could go on and on. That record is well documented.
Sure
Tucker
is.
chose nevertheless to interview him. Now, the problem was that this was not in isolation. He had the World War II revisionist Darrell Cooper. He wasn't a historian. Tucker said he was the most prominent historian writing today in America. That was
so. Well, let's pull that back just a second.
Tucker chose nevertheless to interview him. Now, the problem was that this was not in isolation. He had the World War II revisionist Darrell Cooper. He wasn't a historian. Tucker said he was the most prominent historian writing today in America. That was not true. He's never written an article or a book about World War II. But he is.
I'll let him finish.
Known for suggesting that a cabal in the United States, and you know who that is, had.
Now, I'm not going to let him finish. Like, there again, there's this cabal in United. You know who he means. Well, no, say it, Victor. Say it. Come on. Have the courage of your convictions. Say what you think that Darrell Cooper is saying. Accuse him of being an anti-Semite. Just come out and say it. That's what you're doing. You're accusing Darrell Cooper of being an anti-Semite. But I want to show you what Tucker Carlson actually said about Darrell Cooper. in his own words. So here's Tucker Carlson interviewing Daryl Cooper last year, and here's how he introduced Daryl.
Why are current events so unclear to so many people? And I always go back and or you certainly can't plan a coherent future unless you understand. And then I think, well, why do people know so little about history? Probably because it's not taught. And then to the extent that it is taught in, say, airport bookstores, our popular historians are people like John Meacham and Michael Beschloss and Doris Kearns Goodwin and Anne Applebaum.
This is where you need to listen very closely. Tucker is giving a list of popular historians, people who are well read here, and listen very closely to what he actually says about Daryl.
Not only sort of the dumbest people in the country, I would say, I know most of them, but also completely dishonest political actors. And so I think I can tell that you hate compliments, but I just want to say, I think you are the most important popular historian working in the United States today. You work in a different medium on Substack X podcasts, but I'm a fan of yours because of the way you treat history, which is with relentless curiosity and honesty. And I'm sure you have all kinds of political beliefs or religious beliefs or whatever, but I feel like you get to what you think is true based on really intense research. So for those people who aren't familiar with who you are, I want people to know who you are, and I want you to be widely recognized as the most important historian in the United States, because I think that you are.
So we're gonna pull that back. Remember that Victor Davis Hanson said here's what he said. So listen close.
To interview him. Now, the problem was that this was not in isolation. He had the World War II revisionist Daryl Cooper. He wasn't a historian. Tucker said he was the most prominent historian writing today.
Is that what Tucker said?
That was not true. He's never written.
Is that what Tucker said? Did Tucker say he's the most prominent historian today? And so then he goes on here with this. He's never written
an article or a book about World War II, but he is known for suggesting that a cabal in the United States, and you know who that is.
So think about that. Victor Davis Hanson is saying that Daryl has never written an article. Not true. He has written articles, massive amounts of articles. But it's because it's not on what they consider an approved platform. So this is gatekeeping. What you're seeing here is gatekeeping. Victor Davis Hanson is engaging in gatekeeping. And he's going to go on and he's going to explain just how important gatekeeping is and who his gatekeeping hero is here in just a couple of minutes. So in his mind, he accuses Tucker of saying that Daryl Cooper is the most prominent historian in the United States today, but he can't be the most prominent historian in the United States today because he's a revisionist. Right? He's a revisionist. Let's look at that again.
Names, I could go on and on. That record is well documented. Tucker chose, nevertheless, to interview him. Now, the problem was that this was not in isolation. He had the World War II revisionist Daryl Cooper. He wasn't a historian. Tucker said he was the most prominent historian writing today in America. That was not true. He's never written an article or a book about World War II. But he is.
So he's a revisionist, and he's never written an article. Well, he has written articles, demonstrable. Go find him on Substack. His stuff is powerful and it's well researched. 2, he calls him revisionist. The revisionist here is Victor Davis Hanson. Victor Davis Hanson is the revisionist in this situation because he is revising and gatekeeping and saying that I'm the arbiter of who is a historian in the United States. And it can't be Daryl Cooper because Daryl Cooper hasn't jumped through the hoops that I want him to jump through. Well, maybe he is not a classically trained historian, but that doesn't mean he's not telling the truth. And you don't get to call somebody a revisionist when you disagree with them just because you disagree with them. Because they're not towing your approved lines. That's exactly the problem with our society today. We get to label you if you don't say what we want you to say. We get to label you as whatever, a radical or a revisionist or an anti-Semite or whatever, if you're not saying what we want you to say. So we're going to let Victor go on a little bit more here, but we're going to replay just a little bit of what Tucker said about Daryl here. He's very clear.
So sometimes I think to myself, like, why are current events so unclear to so many people? And I always go back to the question of history. You can't really understand what's happening right now unless you understand what has happened before. You certainly can't plan a coherent future unless you understand. And then I think, well, why do people know so little about history? Probably because it's not taught. And then to the extent that it is taught in, say, airport bookstores, our popular historians are people like John Meacham and Michael Beschloss and Doris Kearns Goodwin and Anne Applebaum, not only sort of the dumbest people in the country, I would say, I know most of them, but also completely dishonest political actors. And so I think I can tell that you hate compliments, but I just want to say, I think you are the most important popular historian working in the United States today.
Important. His initial response, and we don't need to play any more of his comments there. His initial, Tucker's initials, most important popular historian today. That's an incredibly important clarification, folks. That's a very important clarification. But see, Victor Davis Hanson doesn't like Daryl Cooper because he doesn't agree with Daryl Cooper. And because he doesn't agree with Daryl Cooper, then he gets to label him and then also say that Tucker doesn't get to have him on. So we're going to let Victor speak some more.
Known for suggesting that a cabal in the United States, and you know who that is, had unduly influenced the Roosevelt administration to ally with Russia over either keeping neutral or allying, as a later guest, David Cullum suggested, allying with Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. Many of the things that Cooper said, as I've addressed in writing and in podcasts, were demonstrably untrue. So there was a backstory there. So when people got
so what he said here is an assertion of Daryl's incorrectness by then appealing to his own authority. It's the logical fallacy of appeal to authority, but it's the worst kind of appeal to authority. He's appealing to his own authority, saying, "I've debunked Daryl Cooper." Victor Davis Hanson says, "Don't listen to Daryl because I've debunked him. I've debunked him. So now go read my stuff. Read my things where I've debunked him." If you don't think that's what he said, just listen to him one more time.
Or allying, as a later guest, David Cullum suggested, allying with Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. Many of the things that Cooper said, as I've addressed in writing and in podcasts, were demonstrably untrue. So there was a backstory there. So when people...
Oh, wait. So when you write something or you go on a podcast, you're an authority, but Daryl's not. Well, why? Why are you an authority, but Daryl isn't? And there again, I don't know you from Adam. I don't know what your credentials are. I don't care because I don't get into credentialism. But why are your writings and your podcasts so much more important, so much more powerful, so much more effective than everybody else's? Victor, why? Why do you get to say, "Oh, I've debunked Daryl Cooper, so listen to me. I'm the authority here"? This is absolutely the problem that we have with the appeal to authority fallacy and credentialism here in the U.S., especially. not just in the Europe, Western European culture, but just especially in the U.S. Credentialism and appeal to authority. Somebody that I respect, who is very well qualified, said that this is wrong, therefore it's wrong. And I don't have to know anything about the topic. I can just make this assertion, and it must be true because I believe this person. And that's what Victor's doing here. He's literally relying on his own authority to discredit Tucker and to call Tucker out for how he's platformed this dangerous revisionist. I would challenge you to go listen to Daryl Cooper's Martyr Made podcast and tell me that he's not a well-researched writer and podcaster. I cannot name one person who is more well-researched and better at what he does than Daryl Cooper.
Well, God, when Tucker had Nick Fuentes have this wide platform, he has a big audience. The question was, why are you doing this? And if you want to have an edgy guest, you have to be very careful. Radical left or radical right. They get prominence because they're usually rhetoricians, they're orators, they're demagogues, and they're adept at speaking. And when William F. Buckley, on his famous firing,
God forbid someone be adept at speaking. What we should be settling for are, orange hair clowns or, mentally fragile and emotionally unstable people like Biden and Harris or Donald Trump. That's what we should settle for. We should settle for, guys like Donald Trump who cannot complete a sentence without going off on some tangent. That's okay. He's approved. Donald Trump's approved. Biden's approved. Kamala Harris is approved. I mean, I'm sure that Victor Davis Hanson wouldn't approve because he's not in that left-wing camp. But rhetoricians, people who are adept at speaking, are somehow more dangerous than the people who aren't adept at speaking. And I will tell you, I have watched the rise of Trump populism and the fact this guy cannot string together a coherent thought, even when he's got a teleprompter, and people adore him. Which one's more dangerous? Which one's more dangerous? Populism or someone who's a rhetorician who's adept at speaking but doesn't get the applause and the accolades and the worship of someone like Donald Trump? You really think that someone like Daryl Cooper or Nick Fuentes being platformed, if you will, by Tucker Carlson, they're more dangerous than the populism of the Trump populism movement? And I voted for Trump, but don't tell me that Trump somehow lacks any potential to be dangerous, Victor. And so what he's going to do here is now another appeal to authority, but this is the appeal of authority to William F. Buckley. Let's pull that back just a second here. Here we go.
Why are you doing this? And if you want to have an edgy guest, you have to be very careful. Radical left or radical right. They get prominence because they're usually they're orators, they're dogs, and a dicking. Buckley, on his famous firing line, had such people. He took a great risk. Eldridge Cleaver, one of the founders of the Black Panther Party, a convicted felon, a serial rapist. Ditto Huey Newton, who shot and killed someone on the show. William eugenist. Buckley did something different than Tucker did. The point was not to.
This is very important for you to catch what he's doing here. One, appeal to authority. William F. Buckley was the best at this. And we're going to talk about William F. Buckley from a paleo-conservative, original conservative perspective, a paleo-libertarian perspective, an anarcho-capitalist perspective in a little bit. But what he's doing here is he's saying William F. Buckley's style is the only approved style. More gatekeeping and more appeals to authority and more appeals to credentialism, because you have to do it the way Buckley did. And Buckley's got a lot of problems, by the way, folks. Buckley is not the conservative hero that everybody thinks he is. But Victor Davis Hanson is clearly a Buckleyite. Clearly. So we're going to let him go on.
To give them an unfiltered platform without disagreement or counter examination or rebuttal, but to show everybody that these ideas were not only dangerous, but could limit them, something Tucker didn't do, which poses another question.
So right here, Tucker didn't do that. He didn't cross-examine Nick Fuentes, which I would argue is untrue. He didn't go about it maybe necessarily the same way that William F. Buckley did, but William F. Buckley doesn't have the corner on how you cross-examine someone. Once again, Buckley has some problems, and we'll get to it. And he didn't cross-examine Daryl Cooper the way he wants. Now, here's what he picks on. You guys are going to love this, because this is like so hypocritical. It's just absolutely hypocritical. Absolutely it reeks of not only gatekeeping, but protectionism. And we'll talk about why. Listen in.
An interview in the same format with Ted Cruz, a fellow conservative. At one time, they were very close. And yet, Tucker used all of his knowledge, his wit, his repartee, and cross-examined Cruz unmercifully. And he came with data. He drilled him on the population of Iran.
Did you catch this? He's mad that Tucker did exactly what he wanted Tucker to do with Nick Fuentes and Daryl Cooper, but instead he did it to Ted Cruz. Now, what's the difference between Daryl Cooper, Nick Fuentes, and Ted Cruz? I'm going to let you guys think about it for a second as he talks. What's the difference? Put it in the chat. If you're watching this on live, put it in the chat. What's the difference between Ted Cruz and Daryl Cooper and Nick Fuentes? And if you're watching this on replay, just say it out loud to yourself or whoever you're watching this with. What is the big difference between Ted Cruz and the other two, Nick Fuentes and Daryl Cooper? We'll get to it in a second.
You know that? What I'm getting at is, why would you give an interview with a conservative senator who agrees in 90% with what you do, and yet try to cross-examine him and interrupt him and make him look foolish? If that's what you want, it's a free country. But why not use that same technique at someone who is well beyond the limits of acceptable discourse?
There it is. He gave you the answer. Ted Cruz is a freaking senator, Victor Davis Hanson. Ted Cruz has power that Nick Fuentes is never going to get. Ted Cruz has power that Daryl Cooper doesn't have. Ted Cruz has the Senate seat that he has, which means he has the ear of people like the President of the United States. He has the ear of people in the Defense Department, the Department of War. He has the ear of people in all sorts of bureaucratic positions. He has the ear of other politicians. He has the ear of the governor of Texas. He has the ability to sway and influence people with his senatorial position. Daryl Cooper doesn't have that. Daryl Cooper has a Substack. Daryl Cooper has a podcast. Nick Fuentes has a podcast. That's it. So when you have Senator Ted Cruz, who has come out and said in public comments that 13 years ago when he first got into the United States Senate, he was going to become the leading voice for Israel. That's what he said. That's why Tucker Carlson went after him. That's why Tucker Carlson asked him what the population of Iran was. That's why. because you have a man, Ted Cruz, demanding that people fund through their wage slave tax cattle rolls, fund Israel to the tune of $4 billion just above the table. That's what we know. $4 billion a year, and fund bombing Iran on behest of Israel. Yes, folks, that's the difference between Ted Cruz and Nick Fuentes and Daryl Cooper. You're damn right that Tucker went after him, and rightly so. Because nobody's going after the Ted Cruzes of the world. Nobody in the conservative movement's going after the Ted Cruzes of the world and asking him, why are you okay admitting that you went to the United States Senate as a senator from Texas to represent Israel? That's what he said. That's not what I said. That's what he said. Tucker called him on it. Tucker called him on, what do you know about Iran? He knew nothing about Iran. Nothing. Ted Cruz gets massive amounts of money from AIPAC, folks. Massive amounts of money. But if you say anything about that, according to Victor Davis Hanson, you're out of line and you're an anti-Semite.
And for ostracism of blacks and Jews, and what Nick Fuentes was that.
Imagine being a base
hold on.
44.
Sorry about that, folks. There we go.
Why is this happening? Why are we having Candace Owens saying Nick Fuentes get this sudden prominence? Why these World War II revisionist historians?
You're going to love his conclusion of why this is happening. Because, Victor Davis Hanson can read minds now. That's literally what he's doing here. Going after Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes, Daryl Cooper. And now he's going to tell you why there's a rise of... Oh, and by the way, notice here, he also... Can you see this? Revisionist historians. You probably can't. You can't see where my cursor is moving. But notice on the bottom of the screen... So is Daryl Cooper a revisionist, or is he a revisionist historian? Is he a historian at all? I mean, what's the take? Come on. What is it? This is all about Israel. And we're going to have a talk about anti-Semitism here in a second. But I want to talk about Buckley before we get moving on here. And where he gives you, before Victor gets to the point where he gives us an explanation for why there's apparently rising anti-Semitism. William F. Buckley was a monster of a man. He destroyed the conservative movement. He was an interventionist. He believed in the surveillance state. He pushed for the surveillance state before the surveillance state was even a thing that people talked about. He despised free market, what he called free market radicals. He despised Ayn Rand. He absolutely shot down anybody who came from the original anti-interventionist conservative movement. Literally destroyed their reputations and pushed them out. He saw U.S. interventionism as a moral duty. He literally backed the CIA's expanded roles, the FBI's domestic security operations. He, early on in the drug wars, the United States government was strongly in favor of them and only recanted later in life, right before he died. He attacked people like Murray Rothbard, Frank Chodorov, Robert Taft-style isolationist. He excommunicated these people. He was in favor of the Vietnam debacle. He advocated for and pushed the ideology that civil liberties took a back seat to anti-communism. Like, let that sink in. So here's William F. Buckley is who Victor Davis Hanson wants us to see as a paragon of how to interview people who are dangerous, while he advocated for you giving up your civil liberties to fight anti-communism. You can't get any more communist than that. Become anti-communist by giving up your civil liberties. Here's a statement from Buckley as it regards big government and policies like CIA adventurism in Vietnam. He said this: "We have to accept big government for the duration, for neither an offensive nor defensive war can be waged except through the instrument of a totalitarian bureaucracy." One more time, folks. We have to accept big government for the duration, for neither an offensive nor defensive war can be waged except through the instrument of a totalitarian bureaucracy. Here's Buckley supported state power against civil liberties. And, people would describe him as being witty and having libertarian leanings on some cultural questions. He defended loyalty oaths. He believed that Americans should be required to take loyalty oaths. He believed in crackdowns on dissidents, not violent dissidents, just dissidents in general. He wanted an expansion in police powers. He had, and you can say what you want about the corn. You can say what you want about corn, but he had harsh anti-corn measures. And once again, U.S. interventionism was a moral duty. And to some degree, a lot of people see him as a founding father of neoconservatism and believe that constitutionalism should take a back seat to anti-communism, along with, the civil liberties being stripped away. There are so many things about William F. Buckley that should concern liberty-loving conservatives and libertarians. We could go on and on, but this is about Victor Davis Hanson and his gatekeeping here. So let's get back to his gatekeeping.
I think part of it is the left has so mainstreamed anti-Semitism, as we see on college campuses.
The left has mainstreamed anti-Semitism. He still hasn't defined anti-Semitism yet. He's implied a definition, which is strictly, you just don't like Jews. You don't like Jews, and therefore that's anti-Semitism. And I would agree. Anti-Semitism can involve not liking Jews. But definitionally, what he's talking about here is not liking Israel, not wanting to support Israel. And we'll get to that. But he's saying here that the left has mainstreamed anti-Semitism, and now his conclusion is going to just blow your mind.
And really said, that if you're Jewish, you're for Israel, and if you're for Israel, you're for genocide, and demonize and threaten the safety of Jews. That people on the right felt, well, the left has sort of taken down the restrictions on what we can say and do, and we're going to take advantage of it and do what they're doing. So here he is. Listen to this very closely. Genocide and demonize and threaten the safety of Jews. That people on the right felt, well, the left has sort of taken down the restrictions on what we can say and do, and we're going to take advantage of it and do what they're doing. We anti-Semites on the right are going to join the freedom allow the anti-Semitism on the left. There's demography too. So he's asserting a motivation that there's just been this closeted group of anti-Semites on the right, conservative anti-Semites, who have been waiting for the left to rise up and display their anti-Semitism so that they could then go out and display their anti-Semitism as well.
that like somehow conservative anti-Semites were just biding their time. Like he's literally reading motivation into something based on his definition of what anti-Semitism is without actually giving a definition of what anti-Semitism actually is. He has yet in all of this to define anti-Semitism. He's not given a clear-cut definition of what anti-Semitism is. And this is not for nothing, all centering around, because he went back, remember, Nick Fuentes is no Charlie Kirk. And then he brings up Candace Owens and all these other people. Well, why? Because there's a lot of talk, not about Jewish people. We're not talking about Jewish people, because I have dozens and dozens of examples, hundreds of examples of Judaism, people who follow Judaism, and people who are ethnically Jewish who despise geopolitical Israel, who despise Zionism. So he's conflating, and we'll get in there again, he's going to show this. He's conflating being against Zionism with being an anti-Semite. And somehow anti-Semites on the right, people who really hate the Jews on the right, we're waiting for the left to open the door for them. What does that even make any sense? Like they were closeted and they had to stay closeted until the left that they hate made it popular. Like if they really hated if they were really anti-Semites, and as much as the conservative right hates the left, you think that they're all of a sudden going to come out and now embrace the left, the anti-Semitic left, as brothers in the fight? Right? No. Like, Victor, you are, for somebody who claims to be an authority, who's debunked Daryl Cooper, you are not the brightest light on the tree. Like, you should have stayed out of this argument, Victor. You really should have stayed out of this argument, Victor, because I'm over here, Mr. Nobody, Mr. P-Brain, Mr. No Intellect. Like, come on, folks, let's just be honest. I'm not an intellectual giant. I am not a historian, especially as Victor would define a historian. But I'm over here going, this argument is crap. I can shred this argument. Why is no one else up here shredding this argument? Victor Davis Hanson is this is a joke. And the fact that he put this out for the Daily Signal, and they were like, yeah, run that. That's amazing.
The Jewish population is not as big as it is. It's only about 7 million. And a lot of Jews are non-observant, or they're in part of the melting pot natural process of assimilation and acculturation. In contrast, the Arab and Muslim population is approaching 3.5 or 4 million, and it's scheduled to take over from Jews. And they are
scheduled. It's scheduled. Like somewhere there's a secret cabal. Wait a minute. So there's no secret cabal of Jewish people doing anything, but there's a secret cabal of Muslims in America who have scheduled that they're taking over for the Jews. What the actual French toast, Victor? It's scheduled. Like you said, you're supposed to be this really bright historian or whatever it is you do, and you like it's scheduled. Like, wait, so like, are you a Victor? You got to. I mean, is this helmet right here behind your head, this Greek helmet? Is that actually made out of tinfoil, Victor? Do you like wear that around to avoid having your brainwaves scanned by the deep state? Because that is the most conspiratorial thing I have ever heard anybody say. The takeover by the Muslims is scheduled. That's worse than the whacked out Christians who go around going, we're having a revival next week. We're scheduling a revival. Like, you don't schedule a revival. You can't even schedule a revival meeting. Like, you could schedule a meeting, but you can't call it a revival. But the Muslim takeover of a replacement of the Jews in the United States has been scheduled. So after this conversation, you should probably put folks, now back to your regularly scheduled takeover. like we used to get when we'd get TV interrupted before everybody switched away from watching live TV. This is just like the man is a moron. He's just stupid. Just the dumbest arguments.
Located these populations in key electoral swing states: Michigan, Pennsylvania, New Jersey.
I don't deny that, folks. Like, Minnesota is a perfect example of how Muslims, Somali Muslims in particular, were very specifically like placed in Minneapolis and St. Paul and Rochester, Minnesota in particular, because they knew they could use them to swing, and they have swung Rochester. When I first came to the area, Rochester was a conservative red bastion. You could count on Rochester voting in conservatives across the board, and it's no longer that way. It is now firmly entrenched in blue, 100%. But do you not see the irony that Victor Davis Hanson is attacking Tucker Carlson for platforming people like Nick Fuentes, who was talking about people who are coming into the country, because Nick Fuentes doesn't just talk about Jewish people. He talks about all sorts of ethnicities. He's talking about revisionists like Daryl Cooper, a revisionist, while he's sitting here talking about this conspiracy to replace the Jewish population with the Muslim population and how they're being selected to go into key areas. Like, why is that cabal real, but the cabal of potential Zionist control is not real, Victor? Why is a cabal of Zionism not legit? Huh? You don't think that a country like geopolitical Zionist Israel couldn't orchestrate something like that? I mean, the entire Epstein situation was clearly an operation by Mossad and the CIA, and if not other intelligence agencies. But we're supposed to believe that that's all this amorphous, like, just conspiracy theory. But the reality is that the cabal of Muslims and Islamic adherents, that's happening, but not a Zionist controlling arm. No cabal of Zionism at all.
And a lot of people think, you know what, we have to give a certain leeway to anti-Semitic ideas expressed by this particular Muslim or Arab, because the Jew.
What? No one has said that. No one has said that. No one in their right mind has said we have to allow a certain amount of anti-Semite views to protect the Muslim population for our voting purposes. Like, Victor, no one has said that. You're asserting this without proof. Like, if you have the proof, Victor, put it up. I challenge you, Victor. Reach out to me. MBRRpodcast@yahoo.com. Show me your proof, you thin-haired hack. And K2, if you're watching this, I love you, brother, but the fact that I am mad at you for doing this to me. But this needs to be responded to. So K2, love you, bro. Don't you ever make me watch this guy's garbage again. But this is literally the most anti-intellectual, low intellect, low info, low IQ garbage I have ever heard by way of arguments. And it's so contradictory. We've got one cabal over here. That's legitimate. That's a legitimate cabal. But the Zionist cabal, that doesn't exist.
Going the way of the Greek lobby. There was a really important group of Greek Americans used to ensure that Greece was treated fairly, and now they're intermarried and immigration is stopped from Greece. Maybe that's a reason as well. But there's one.
What? That is what? Like, things change, Victor. Things change. That's all it is. Things just change.
Their key reason why we're seeing this really dangerous anti-Semitism emerge on the right. I want to say, first of all, there is a right-wing anti-Semitism is usually found among elites. It's in the university. It has a lot to do with the Middle East and its current manifestations. And usually it's Marxist. In other words, that the Jews are sneaky middlemen that control the economy. It comes right out of the mouth of Karl Marx.
Karl Marx
And this
was an anti-Semite. No arguments. But guess what? The biggest proponents of Marxism in like what became the Soviet Union were Jews. The Bolshevik Revolution had a massive amount of Jewish people involved. Massive amount of Jewish people involved. Like indisputable. And we see it consistently throughout the rise of communism in Eastern Europe, of Marxism in Eastern Europe. The rise of those things, it's demonstrably true. That doesn't mean that every single Jew is a communist. It doesn't mean every single one of them is a Marxist. But to sit here and say that the anti-Semitism of the left is different than the anti-Semitism of the right because these people are elites, they're well-educated, and they're all Marxists, well, like, what? There are massive amounts of people within that are Jewish ethnically that are Marxist, Victor. They are openly Marxist.
This was what the Soviets were. Joseph Stalin was an anti-Semite. So we know what that is, that they are settler colonialists, that they're white victimizers on this Marxist binary the left has established. The right wing is a little bit different. It's killers. They were responsible for the death of Jesus Christ, or they are not completely white. They're of a different race. It's a little bit.
Okay, this argument, they're not completely white. They're of a different race. Definitionally, Semites are not white, Victor. They're not white, definitionally. If you go to the original people group that gave rise to the Hebrew people, they were Chaldeans. They were not white. God, according to the scriptures, the Christian scriptures and the Jewish scriptures, God called the Chaldeans, Abraham, out of the land of Ur of the Chaldees. And he took Abraham and he made him a mighty nation. Not because of anything that he did, but because he was not well known and he was a small family group. And he called Abraham out to make him the Hebrew people. So definitionally, you cannot be white and be a Semite. Now, there are the Ashkenazis and whatnot, but your argument is that conservatives don't like the Jews because they're not white. So what you're saying is, Victor, that the only anti-Semites on the conservative side are white, low-info, evangelical Christians. That's what you're saying here. White, low-info, low IQ, evangelical Christians don't like Jews because they're not fully white. So now, not only are they not just anti-Semites, but they're also just race-baiting bastards. All these people hate all the other ethnicities. That's what you're saying, Victor. Like, that's literally what you just said here.
Bit more virulent, a lot more virulent, but it's easy. Therefore, it's more easily identifiable. The left is more insidious because it's practice and a creed of the elite and the educated, supposedly. But there's this one key thing that's going on that is allowing these people to come forward. And when they come forward and they're mainstream, then elected officials like Marjorie Taylor Greene or advisors former advisors like Steve Bannon, Candace Owen, people get into the mix. And I think the reason for the rise of anti-Semitism base of the MAGA movement felt that it was the driving force.
He's just throwing names out there. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Steve Bannon, these isolationists. And that's the problem, folks. That's what his beef is. He knows he doesn't have an argument about anti-Semitism because he hasn't defined anti-Semitism. He has not given a definition of anti-Semitism that's even close to being accurate. Once again, the Jewish people are not the only Semites. The Palestinian people are Semites. 100% Semitic. The many of the tribes in that region, once again, that helped settle Jordan, that helped settle what used to be Transjordan. But Jordan and Syria and Lebanon and whatnot are Semitic. They are a Semitic people group. The Palestinians are definitely Semitic. They have so much in common with the original Jewish people who settled the region. There's just absolutely no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's no way around it. That's just the reality. And you're here making this argument. It's just fallacious. You haven't defined anything.
And that it was going to be isolationist, and we were not going to get involved in the Middle East, and they were very suspicious of so-called what they call neocons and what they call Christian Zionists.
And there it is. Neocons and Christian Zionists. Absolutely. The neocons are 100%. They're a dying breed because you have to be a very particular thing to be defined as a neocon. And it's not for this stream. We can maybe talk about it some other time. But I would encourage you to look into the origins of neoconservatism. It is a left-wing conservatism, believe it or not. The people who formed it are predominantly former Trotskyites who left Trotskyism and brought their interventionist policies of expansionism into the right because the right was ripe for the picking because of people like William F. Buckley. And so they're doing these things. They're expanding expansionism, if you will, and now they're labeling anybody who's an isolationist or who has concerns about the growing military-industrial complex and the illegal bankers wars. Like, folks, we've just allegedly got done fighting a 20-plus year global war on terror that accomplished nothing. It was regime change and expansionism all over the place for the last 20 years. And every single place we've been, as the United States, we've caused nothing but chaos and death and destruction. We've not left a single country in better condition than it was when we went in. And people who are suspicious of Christian Zionism, by the way, Christian Zionism cannot exist. You cannot be a Zionist and be a Christian. You cannot. Those two things are mutually exclusive. Charles Box, I am well aware that AIPAC is very dangerous. I'm completely aware of that. Trust me, I've talked about AIPAC quite a bit. Alan Polino, I understand that Jews come in different colors. I don't know if you're talking to me or if you're talking to Victor, but the reality is that this is all about them defending Zionism. This is a defense of Zionism, which is not Judaism. It is not Semitic. Zionism is not a Semitic thing. It is not a religious thing. Zionism is not about a home country for a religious people. Zionism is about establishing a state with power. That's it. That's what it was about. And when you look at the founders of Zionism and how everything grew under Zionism, many of the orchestrating members of the Zionist movement that actually ended up going into the Middle East and taking over Palestine were communists. They were Marxists. Ben Gurion was a Marxist communist. That's what he was. 100% true. You cannot argue against it. Ben Gurion was a Marxist. He left Marxism as an organization per se, but he brought all of his Marxism into his version of Zionism. And so Zionism is not compatible with Christian thought. It just cannot be. It cannot be.
As Tucker said, he hates Christian Zionists over any other people, even bin Laden, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, I don't know.
So notice all those boogeymen that he brought up. Bin Laden, Al-Qaeda, ISIS. Well, first of all, Tucker retracted his comment because he realized it was not a good comment to make. He recognized the problem with his view on that. He 100% recognized that and how he expressed it. He doesn't hate the individuals. He came out and he clarified this. If you don't believe me, it's very easy to find. Tucker came out and said, I do not hate the individuals. I despise Zionism. Every Christian, if you are a Christian, should hate Zionism. If you're an atheist, you should hate Zionism. If you're a observant Jew, so if you are a follower of Judaism, you should hate Zionism. Zionism is not compatible with Christianity. Zionism is not compatible with Judaism. Zionism is not compatible with liberty or freedom. It's not. It is a totalitarian system built on supremacy. Built on supremacy.
But they were losing influence. Donald Trump proved that he is not a neo-isolation. He's a Jacksonian. Targeted strikes to preserve and enhance deterrence. Take out Soleimani, Baghdadi, take out the nuclear facilities in Iran. But
listen, so take out Soleimani. Everybody on the right that loves expansionism and loves the war state always likes to talk about Trump taking out Soleimani. Do you guys know where Soleimani was when Trump had him murdered? General Soleimani from Iran, he was the top commander of the Iranian forces, was in Iraq, not to take over Iraq. He was in Iraq to stop the expansion of ISIS because ISIS was threatening the borders of Iran. Soleimani was in Iraq commanding his military to stop ISIS from taking any territory in Iran. When Trump found out, he ordered him assassinated. Trump ordered the assassination of a man who was actively fighting, who we were told was our enemy, the group that he just mentioned, ISIS. And this Jacksonianism, like, first of all, Andrew Jackson, if you're going to rely on Andrew Jackson, bro, you got problems. Okay? Like Jackson is not the paragon of conservative values. Like, we started going down a really dark path after the American Civil War. And Jackson was one of them.
One-shot deals where we're not involved in a forever war. And they felt that he was being unduly influenced the way in the past maybe Roosevelt or Truman had been unduly influenced by Jews, either to ally with Russia or to help found the state of Israel. And therefore, our relationship with Israel showed the influence of
there again,
Jewish
he keeps
advisors.
saying Jewish because he's conflating Zionist with Judaism. It's a very tropey meme that Zionism and Judaism are all the same, and they are not all the same. Once again, there are millions of anti-Zionist Jews who are not even religious, non-religious and religious Jews hate Zionism. And if you don't think that Zionism had an undue influence on the government of the United States, not Jews, Zionist. If you don't think that exists, you're part of the problem. There's no hope for you. Ted Cruz gets millions and millions of dollars from AIPAC. Donald Trump's, one of his, I'm going to say, top 3 donors to his campaign was the Adelson family. Now it's just Miriam Adelson. Dual citizenship with Israel and the United States. Dual citizenship. She's one of his biggest donors. She has his ear. You don't think there's any kind of influence from Zionism there?
When you look at the Jewish advisor, they're some of the most prominent, important, brilliant people in the MAGA movement. Stephen Miller, special advisor to the president.
Did I? Oh, I'm sorry. I got my time frame wrong. I'm sorry about Jackson. I didn't mean it that way. Yeah. Look, I'm doing this off the cuff. I don't have a script, so sorry about getting the time frame on Jackson wrong. That was not. I did not mean to say Civil War. I did not mean to equate him with the Civil War. But my apologies. Thank you for the correction. I really appreciate that.
Jared Kushner and Stephen Witkoff were the architects of the Gaza ceasefire. Howard Lutnick was very prominent in the campaign. He's the Secretary of Commerce. I don't think we've ever had a better EPA director than Lee Zeldin. So there's not a secret cabal of Jews that are pulling strings. They're open, transparent. They're part of the MAGA movement. And let me just finish with Israel. This demonization that Israel is driving cons in the war. And Powell come to this circle of forecast that was not people that had to make that.
He's got to stop with the Judaism thing. With Jewish. Excuse me. This book right here. I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see it. This book right here by this book right here by my good friend Scott Horton. Time to end the war. Enough already. Time to end the war on terrorism, folks. This goes through and details in stark relief who influenced the American global war on terror and the people who were behind it. And no, it wasn't just Zionists, but Israel had a hand in pulling strings and manipulating the philosophy. So I'd strongly recommend if you don't like to actually pick up a book and read and you prefer to listen, it's on audio. You can listen to this book on audio. You could check out the Scott Horton Show. Scott is a researcher, and he is a phenomenal researcher. I've had him on my show numerous times now. Well, twice at least. But Scott is phenomenal, and he will make the argument. He will make the arguments to show you that it wasn't Jewish influence, it's Zionist influence, and it is all over the place. And as Boogerman says, almost every person involved was a Zionist overwhelmingly. The reality is like, this is not Zionism. Anti-Zionism is not anti-Jewish. It is not anti-Semitic. Anti-Zionism is an opposition to a worldview, a political philosophical position, just like being opposed to Marxism, just like being opposed to fascism. It's just the truth. Zionists. There are Zionists in the Trump administration. There have been Zionists in every single administration since Israel was, since before. And one of the reasons that exists is because of the rise of dispensationalism as a Christian theology 250 some years ago. It's just a reality. So we're going to get back to Victor Davis Hanson here and let him finish up his thoughts.
Decision. Richard Pearl, David Frum, Max Boot, maybe they were advisors, but there was no neocon cabal.
Oh wait, so were these Zionists, not Jews, were these Zionists, were they advisors? Why do you have advisors if you're not making decisions on what your advisors say? That's like an ancient king having a food taster to check his food to make sure it's not poisoned, but then saying, hey, food taster, bring me that food, taste it, and then before the food taster has a chance to finish tasting it, you just dive in. No, you have advisors to help you make decisions. So if you have Zionist advisors telling you, oh yeah, by the way, this is a really good idea. This is what we should do. And then to say that they have decision-making power, advisors don't need to have decision-making power. If you guys aren't familiar, please get familiar. They're in Tolkien's eponymous work, he has so many books, but when you look at the Lord of the Rings trilogy, there's Grimmer Wormtongue, who is an advisor to the king of the Rohirrim, the Riders of Rohan. And Grimtongue is under the influence of Sauron. And he's got the ear of the king, King Theoden. And he's constantly whispering in his ear, telling him, hey, do this, hey, do that, hey, do this, hey, do that. The Zionists are like Grimtongue or Wormtongue. They are in the ear of the rulers. And so there's this plausible deniability. Hey, look, we didn't set policy, but they're constantly poisoning the minds of the people that they're advising. And if you don't think that's a reality, then you're freaking stupid. You're literally the dumbest person I've ever met, if that's how you feel. So he's exposed himself because he's literally conflating intentionally anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism without defining anti-Semitism, without defining what a Semite is, then going on and then pointing out, well, any attack on Israel, philosophically is an attack on Jews, and any attack on Jews is anti-Semitism. They're not the same. The Israel of 1948 is not the Israel of the Old and early New Testament. They're just not the same. This is geopolitical Zionist Israel. It is a geopolitical country. It is not some rising Jewish state. It is a geopolitical, philosophical stronghold of Zionism. And he's going to say some things here that are just terrible.
And then when you look at Israel opposed the Iraq War. They felt that it was a mixed direction in Western.
Go check out what Scott Horton has exposed about Israel's influence on the global war on terror. You just go and listen. And also listen to the words of the man who orchestrated September 11th of 2001. Bin Laden himself. And the reason why Al-Qaeda hated the United States. We were told it's because they hated our freedom. No, it wasn't. They hated the United States because the United States had occupying armies in places like their holy land, around Mecca, and we were there at the behest of Israel because Israel said, we need you to help us be safe. So when he says that Israel opposed the war in Iraq, once again, you could say something in public, but we've got hidden, we're supposed to be hidden statements from Israel and Israeli politicians about what was really going on. So I would strongly recommend that you listen to Scott Horton's stuff, that you read his books.
Resources, the real enemy, if you were going to do something, and they weren't going to advise that, would be Iran rather than Iraq. If we look at Israel in conclusion, it's a constitutional consensual society in a sea of 500 Muslims that live under autocracy. There's
so much misrepresentation of Israel in this. It's like he's painting it out to be this paragon of democracy and virtue, and it's the safe place, and it's the only place that exists like it. And I'm like, no, it's not. Yes, are there people who are there non-Jewish people who are allowed to vote in Israel? Sure. But they're not. You're not safe in Israel if you're not a Zionist. And this idea that there are more Christians living in Israel than in any other country in the Middle East. Okay, and they get beat up and spit on continuously, and not by Arabs, not by other Semites, but by Zionists.
Million Arab citizens inside Israel, and they have the same rights as Israeli citizens. Don't. There's 180,000 Christians.
There again, they can vote, but their voting block is limited, and if they live in the West Bank, they don't get to vote. They don't have the same rights, and they certainly don't have the same rights if they live in the Gaza Strip. But we get to exclude the Gaza Strip because technically the Gaza Strip doesn't exist within the borders of Israel. So we don't have to talk about that, do we? Do we, Victor? We don't have to talk about the open air prison that is Gaza.
More Christians inside Israel than anywhere in the West Bank, and probably more than anywhere in the Arab world, and they have full rights. Everybody says, these people on the Tucker program saying Jewish state, it's a Jewish state. What you think that
No, it's a Zionist state. This is what people are talking about. This is this conflation, Victor. It's a Zionist state, and there is a difference between a Jewish state and a Zionist state. And first of all, I reject the idea of ethno-states in the first place. There should be no ethno-states. Why in the world is it only Israel that can be an ethno-state? Because everybody says it's okay for them to have an ethno-state, but you can't have an ethno-state anywhere else. So if Denmark decided all of a sudden tomorrow that they were kicking out all non-Danes, that would be terrible. That would be considered ethnic cleansing. They should be open if the Swedes decided to do it. And we know how we feel about the Germans only having Germany for the Germans, right? Right? But Israel? I mean, people are constantly defending Israel being only for the Jews. They need a place of their own. And if you get into the history behind, by the way, why the U.S. and other European, and we have to consider the U.S. as part of the European countries. Francis Schaeffer does a really good breakdown in his book, How Yet Should We Then Live? Or How Then Should We Yet Live? He does a really good breakdown of why the United States is a Western European country. But there was a reason, and it's a terrible reason, why the U.S. and other Western European countries wanted Israel to be formed. You just don't want to talk about it because it's really uncomfortable. Because you'll have to admit some things. And so they did glom on with the Zionists because they had an agenda.
50 plus nations surrounding them they're Islamic states, but the difference is they're autocratic and unfree. Israel is a liberal society.
It is not. Israel is not a liberal society. When you say a liberal society, in this case, we're talking about classical liberalism. They are not a liberal society. Israel is a socialist country. It is a socialist country. By the way, with a GDP, which I hate GDP as a marker of success, they have their people are wealthier than the average American. Full-fledged Israeli citizens are wealthier than the average American, and we give billions of our dollars to them every year. So his arguments are terrible. And by the way, I also want to point out that there are Palestinian Christians and other non-Semitic Christians in Palestine who have been murdered by the IDF. Christian churches were bombed by the IDF, destroyed by the IDF. The oldest church in the Middle East was destroyed by the IDF in the last few months. Christianity is not safe in Israel. The Zionists hate Christianity, which makes American Christo-Zionism ironic. We're almost done.
It's our best friend. We would not have been able to take out the Iranian nuclear threat to the West. And by the way, it wasn't just Israel's idea. The Europeans were terrified of it. We were too. If the IDF's Air Force had not first neutralized the air defenses of
who supplies the IDF's Air Force, Victor? I do, Victor. I pay for their Air Force. We supply them with their technology. We supply them with the Iron Domes, what they need for the Iron Dome. It's so much so that our own air defense stockpiles are diminished because of what we've done for Israel. And this idea that the United States could not have gone in without Israel, are you even listening to yourself? We could say a lot, and as a veteran, I still have a certain sense of pride in my service and in the United States military. I don't want any more wars. I want our troops to come home. We definitely need to get off the freaking coast of Venezuela, folks. We are on the verge of invading Venezuela in some way, shape, or form. If you don't see that, you're just there again, just maybe one of the blindest, dumbest people I've ever met. So we need to bring all our troops home, and we need to stop the interventionism, which is what they hate. Victor Davis Hanson and his ilk hate anti-interventionist. I'm not talking about isolationism. I'm talking about anti-interventionism. The expansion of the imperialistic presidency of the United States has got to stop. But we have a military that is far more powerful than the Israeli military will ever be. We could have very easily done what we did without Israel going in and taking out and softening up those targets. That somehow they were our ally. And by the way, Iran was nowhere near producing a nuclear weapon. They were nowhere near their purification levels, the refining levels on the uranium. It's just an argument from ignorance.
Iran. And when you look at the people who have killed Americans, hundreds of them, blowing up the U.S. embassy, the Israelis took out.
The Marine barracks in 1983 was a very tragic event. It was terrible. How long are we going to go on punishing people for that? What about the USS Liberty, Victor Davis Hanson? An intentional strike on the USS Liberty by Israel. By Israel, in their attempt to suck us into their war. I have a 4-part series of interviews with survivors from the USS Liberty here on my channel. I and my good friend Skipper Arthur from Vet Nation, where we co-host together, we sat down with the survivors and we interviewed some of the survivors. They all know who did it and why. Can we hold that against Israel? Nope, can't do that. Nope, they're our strongest ally. Right, the strongest ally that attacked an American flag ship and murdered people on board that ship. Tried to murder everybody on that ship and sink it. But we need to hold a grudge against Hezbollah and therefore, by proxy, hold a grudge against Iran. Oh, by the way, a country that we overthrew. We orchestrated the coup with Israel that overthrew the Shah and set up the Islamic Revolution there. But yeah, the United States did that.
And nullified and made inert Hezbollah. We were attacking the Houthis independently. Israel has done more damage to them, the common enemy, than we have. So
you hear that? We were attacking them independently, but Israel's done a much better job because they're better than we are. Can you hear this worshipful garbage? This guy worships geopolitical Zionist Israel. This is all about geopolitical Zionist Israel for him. That's it. And if you don't agree with him, you're an anti-Semite. Well, screw you, dude. You don't get to speak for paleo-conservatives. You don't get to speak for the paleo-libertarian. You don't get to speak for the American people anymore. We're gatekeeping now, and you're done.
Alliance with Israel is not anti-U.S. interest. It's in our interest. Whether you're idealistic, and you should be, that we support fellow free nations that have constitutional government and treat their protection
and commit genocide, commit ethnic cleansing. You got to get on board with that too. So there are allies. So what they're doing is not ethnic cleansing. It's not a genocide. It's a right response. And by the way, October 7th was terrible. Hamas is terrible. Oh, by the way, who built up, supported, and said that he would keep Hamas in place as long as he could because he could control the height of the flame? Who was that? Oh gosh. Sounds something like Honeybee, Bumblebee in a fishing net. Bibi Netanyahu. Benjamin Netanyahu funneled money and support to Hamas to build them up so he could control the flame so that he could always get away from a two-state solution. He needed Hamas in place.
Their civil rights, or you believe strategically that we have a small number of very important allies that are muscular, strong. They have the similar interests as we do, both in Europe and Japan.
Connie Adams, I agree with him. If we don't support Israel, this nation will fall like a rock and to the bottom of the pond. Mark my words. If you don't understand, then you're the bigger fool. Connie, your Zionism is showing, and it's literally the most disgusting thing I've ever seen in my life. You need to break free of your Zionism. Israel does not keep the United States alive. Israel is a giant drain on us economically, and they have sucked us into so many worthless wars. Like, you may not like it, but lady, I would absolutely freaking destroy you in a debate on this topic. Like, I would venture a guess that you grew up as a dispensationalist with that kind of rhetoric. Geopolitical Zionist Israel is not an ally of the United States. Get bent, woman.
Japan, South Korea, and that small number of allied nations, Israel is preeminent. Let me just conclude then, empirically.
A country the size of New Jersey is a preeminent ally. What is our vested interest in having anything to do with the Middle East? Why do we need to be in the Middle East at all, Victor Davis Hanson? You've yet to give an explanation for why we need to be involved in the Middle East. Yet, it's literally just expansion of the imperial presidency of the United States. That's it. That's it. There's no other reason. You're a clown, bro.
There is no evidence that World War II, we should have allied with the Germans, or we did something wrong in World War II. It was a heroic effort. We defeated fascism. We defeated Japanese militarism. We defeated Nazism. The Axis killed over 30 million Russians, Chinese.
Victor, how many Christians did the Soviet Union kill with our equipment? The Soviet Union, the country that the Soviet Union that we allied ourselves with to fight against Nazi Germany, which Nazi Germany was an evil place. Fascist Italy was an evil place. The things that Japan did as part of the Axis powers were evil. But how many billions of, in today's dollars, how many billions and trillions of dollars did we give to the Soviet Union that they then turned around and used against the Christian populations in their countries, in the countries that made up the Soviet Union? The Soviet Union killed more people than the Nazis did. The Soviet Union killed millions and millions more using the American equipment and the weaponry that we supplied them. Fact. Indisputable.
Jews, Eastern Europeans, civilians, well aside the military lives.
Bye, Connie. Don't let the door
were responsible for taking. So there's no need for World War II revisionism. There's no need to say that the wars that we've been in.
Dude has such an erection for Daryl Cooper. It's almost funny, but it's too sad. Daryl Cooper is not a revisionist. Daryl Cooper is a truth teller. And he's read and read and read and read and read thousands upon thousands of pages of all of the historians.
Past were prompted by Jews or secret cabals. There's no need to demonize and by having demonize Jews by having Nick Fuentes on a program without cross-examination. And we as conservatives I think we have to speak out. Time we see this recrudescence of anti-Semitism and say it's not founded on history, it's not founded on logic, and some of the most valuable citizens in the conservative movement, as well as the United States at large, are Jewish Americans, and we're very.
What about the Jewish Americans who despise Zionism and hate geopolitical Israel? Many of them conservative. Are they discredited? Are they anti-Semitic Semites? Victor Davis Hanson, you're a joke. I would love for you to reach out to me. I would gladly have you on, and I will destroy you. And I'm a nobody. As Connie says here, just shut up. You're showing your stupidity with every word you say. I am 76 years old, and I know a lot more than you, stupid fool child. What? Connie? I don't care about your age. Your age doesn't make you more proficient. You're not an expert in this. Get bent. So yeah, Victor Davis Hanson, I'd love to have you on. I will literally debunk every one of these points that you have made, and right in front of you.
Very lucky to have such people, and the worst thing that the conservatives.
We're lucky to have all people in this country. Every single person, every ethnicity in this country is valuable. Every human being is valuable. I'm against illegal immigration. But to sit here and somehow say we're so lucky to have the Zionists, the Jews, because there again, somehow that's okay to say, but it's not okay to say about some other group of people. Like there again, Victor, this is not anti-Semitism. It's anti-Zionism, and you're pushing against anti-Zionism, and you're pushing against anti-interventionism. And the only way that you could do that is to build up a straw man and burn it down by saying anybody who is anti-interventionist and anybody who is anti-Zionism is an anti-Semite and therefore discredited. That's your whole argument. That's your whole argument. It's built on false presupposition upon false presupposition.
Movement, the Republicans in particular, would be allow this anti-Semitic virus. That's a term that they often use, but it's a virus. It's a disease. It's a morbidity. We cannot let it spread, and it's past time to stop it. Thank you very much, Victor Davis Hanson, for the Daily Signal.
That was Victor Davis Hanson for stupidity, for the Daily Stupidity. Like, folks, I really appreciate everybody that's been watching and commenting. I wonder if I should try this. Oh, there we go. Probably too late for it to be showing up, but they're up on the screen, so I'll have to remember to do that next time. But I just absolutely, I love feedback. I love having people to play off of, especially people who come in and say stupid things. But I also love people who come in, like somebody I falsely, or not falsely, but mistakenly talked about the Civil War and Andrew Jackson. But and so it's just time that we get to a place where we just no longer put up with the garbage that gets said in defense of geopolitical Israel or Zionism. Like, there's the old statement that was going around that, if you're going to label me something, after a while, I'm just going to embrace your label because it's what good does it do to fight it? But as we've seen with guys like Mark Levin, who's now like calling Tucker Carlson a Nazi and comparing him to Hitler. And now if you have a view that's against Zionism, then you are anti-Semitic. And you just get to the point where you're like, you know what, whatever you want to label me, I don't even care. But we also at the same time really need to be in a place where we are able to point out and refute and explain, even from an uneducated, anti-intellectual, apparently anti-intellectual person like myself. We just have to stop. We can't. We can't just. We've got to take our country back. We've got to become anti-interventionists again. We need to be purveyors of the free market, and we have to stop with allowing censorship from the left and the right. And that's what Victor Davis Hanson was really saying, is that unless you're going to espouse our views from our perspective, we don't want to hear from you anymore. So, folks, I'm going to have some really big stories breaking here over the next few days. I'm going to be putting up some body cam footage and commentary about a family who had their child medically kidnapped by a cop. That's going to be coming out, the first portion of that. I'm not going to be putting it all out at once. And I'm also waiting on some feedback about some stuff about Trooper Ryan Moser, who you guys know I've been covering his story for a long time. In the description of this video, if you like what I do and you want to join the channel, please do. If you want to sub, I would really appreciate the subs. Likes on this, share it if you will. I'd love for this to get into the hands of Tucker Carlson and Daryl Cooper, and I'd also love to engage with Victor Davis Hanson. So if anybody knows him or wants to send this to him, I would just love to talk to him. I'm, definitely beneath him, because his podcast, when he does stuff, it's far more important. There will also be a link not only to join the channel, but a link to my Upside. I'm not sponsored by Upside, but I will be including my link to Upside. If you like to save money and get cash back when you buy gas and groceries, follow my Upside link, and we'll both get a special perk when next time you fuel up. And stick around for more content. Check out the shorts that I put out every day. And like I said, the videos that will be coming out covering multiple stories. One about a medical kidnapping that was orchestrated by social workers here in Southeast Minnesota and executed by a cop. And we're also going to start doing a really big deep dive into a mysterious disappearance of a young man in north central Minnesota who the last people who saw him alive were cops, who then turned around immediately and said, oh, he just ran away and he's in hiding. And that's been 5 years. So really appreciate everybody tuning in. I thank you for the comments, even the ones that people who commented who don't like the content. I love feedback and I love correction. So if you ever want to, come on the show and challenge me and have a friendly debate, shoot me an email, mbrrpodcast@yahoo.com, mbrrpodcast@yahoo.com. So my friends, until next time, fight for your liberty. It is yours. Fight for your freedom. It belongs to you. And as always, Sic Semper Tyrannis.
We are go for liftoff in T-30. Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment. Secondary guidance systems engaged. Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark. All systems are a go. All systems are a go. Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at